Number 20. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Of course I'm talking about Wes Craven's original 1984 masterpiece and not the recent reimagining. Who played Freddy in that one again? When I think of screwed up horror movies, I think of Wes Craven, who helmed The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, prior to introducing the world to the clawed child killer Fred Krueger. If you saw those two films, Nightmare actually seems tame in comparison. But I give this high marks because it's so inventive. What horror movie plays with dreams like this? It takes elements of fantasy and puts them into a gritty horror setting. Robert Englund plays Freddy, a child murderer who was burned to death by a lynch mob of angry parents, only to come back as a hideously scarred dreamwalker, haunting the Elm Street kids in their nightmares. If they die in the dream, they die for real, making him that much more of a threat because no one believes them when they do say something. Heather Langenkamp plays Nancy Thompson, the female protagonist forced to stand by and watch as Freddy kills all her friends. She's the perfect lead, especially because she was a fresh new face at the time and had a certain purity that was characteristic of many females in the genre. She had that girl next door quality, and you genuinely believe her performance when she starts bringing up Freddy to her parents.
I don't know who he is, but he's burned, and he wears a weird hat, and a red and green sweater really dirty.
The film has a great twist when Nancy realizes she can actually pull things out of her dream. This is how she plans to defeat Freddy in the third act. To my knowledge, Robert Englund was the only actor to play his character throughout the entire duration of his respective series. I know Brad Dourif was the only guy to do the voice for Chucky, but when you consider all the makeup that Freddy demands, that's quite a feat. Plus, Freddy had more films than Chucky. I'm not entirely sure if that's a good thing, but regardless, the original stands out as a classic staple of 80s slasher movies and only gets better with age. As far as Nightmare 3 Dream Warriors, that one was a close runner-up, and I've always had a fondness for it, but the original was the first and, in my opinion, the best. Number 19. The Karate Kid. Director John Avildsen directed two very similar films, 1978's Rocky and the 1984's Karate Kid, starring Ralph Macchio as a loner teen who gets bullied by the students of a rough karate dojo, and Pat Morita as the wise Japanese instructor Mr. Miyagi, who trains him martial arts through unconventional means. It follows all the typical conventions of the genre with one major hook. When Daniel thinks Mr. Miyagi is going to teach him, Mr. Miyagi has him do chores around his home, all the while having him subconsciously learn all the motions. The best scene in the whole film is when Daniel, finally fed up with Miyagi's apparent brand of slave labor, is finally let in on Miyagi's oddball methods. The villain, an ex-Vietnam soldier who's gone completely insane and has brainwashed his students to be hardened bullies, is a bit stereotypical, but only adds to the flavor, and actor Martin Kove does a great job playing him. You can see he was having fun with a role that probably didn't seem all that interesting on paper.
You're a pushy little bastard, ain't you? But I like that. I like that.
This movie resonates with me because I was bullied a fair amount as a kid, so to see the underdog rise up and overcome his enemies was always a source of inspiration for me. As far as the sequels go, Karate Kid 2 is decent in that it talks more about Mr. Miyagi, and it was nice to see a change of scenery. Karate Kid 3 is a more of the same, takes little risk type of film, and while it gets a bad rap, it's mildly entertaining. Where the series started to tank was in the next Karate Kid, featuring the acting debut of Hilary Swank to replace Daniel LaRusso. The remake I won't even discuss. It's called Karate Kid, but the characters actually perform kung fu, so what does that tell you? The original is a classic, and I still pop it in from time to time. It has a unique 80s flavor that's hard to ignore.
You want me to drive?
Hey, it's the 80s.
But the story still holds up surprisingly well. Number 18. Goodfellas. Every list has to include at least one mafia movie. Unfortunately, The Godfather was taken, so I went for this one instead. Surprisingly, I'm not big on the whole gangster genre, but with that being said, I love this movie. Wise guy Henry Hill narrates his life story as he gives up school for a life of crime.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
He befriends fellow gangsters James Conway and Tommy DeVito, played by Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. The rest of the film pretty much talks about the perks and the problems with the gangster lifestyle. There isn't even really an antagonist. This is another one that's instantly quotable.
I make you laugh? I'm here to fucking amuse you? What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
And the music adds a lot. My favorite scene is the eerie montage where all the dead bodies start to surface. Watch that scene, listen to the music, and tell me that isn't chilling. Whereas The Godfather was like watching an intricate self-portrait with an incredibly involved plot that unraveled like an epic, Goodfellas glorifies the lifestyle and doesn't follow a typical narrative structure. Scenes stand by themselves, although once in a while, something a character does early on impacts what happens to them later. The last act, which features Hill's last day as a wise guy, gives you that creepy feel of paranoia. I know we're not supposed to root for Henry in the end, but you at least feel his depression when he's forced out of the lifestyle. If I had to stick with one gangster movie to last me until the end of time, sorry Coppola, this one's The Champ. Number 17. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This one's just pure fun. I'm not going to lie, it's dumb entertainment. Many actually consider it Keanu Reeves' most memorable performance.
I fell out of my shoe when I hit the floor! Bag.
Bill and Ted are two aspiring guitarists who are in danger of flunking history. Because their music will eventually have this huge impact on society in the future, Rufus, played by George Carlin, travels to their current time to help them with their history report to prevent them from being broken up. It's got a lot of quirks, such as the use of a phone booth as the actual time machine.
Let's reach out and touch someone.
From here, the characters simply visit different time periods and bring back major historical figures to use in their final report. Tell me you get no enjoyment from this movie. One of the standout scenes is where they travel to medieval England to rescue a pair of princesses from an unjust king.
How's it going, Royal Ugly Dudes?
They're about to be executed in the Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden? Excellent!
Execute them.
Bogus.
When who should come to the rescue but none other than Billy the Kid and Socrates. What a weird combination. It's full of dumb yet likable moments, and it leaves you feeling good when it's over. Number 16.
It is my great pleasure to present to you RoboCop.
Part of me is just proud that so much of this film takes place in Detroit. There's actually talk of Detroit putting up a RoboCop statue the same way Philadelphia put up a Rocky statue. It hasn't happened yet, but you never know. The first time I saw this, I was surprised at just how gritty and violent it was. When Detroit cop Alex Murphy gets shot up and mutilated by a group of trigger-happy thugs, it's balls to the wall. The villain is Clarence Boddicker, played by the dad on That 70s Show.
Bitches leave.
Yeah, that's some variety for you. The first thing he does when he captures Murphy is shoot off his hand. He throws one of his fellow thugs out of an armored vehicle during a police chase.
Can you fly, Bobby?
Clarence, no!
And threatens other drug lords at gunpoint. For such a simplistic-looking villain, he's pretty brutal in his execution. When Murphy becomes RoboCop, that's when the film heats up. In traditional comic book fashion, he goes around cleaning up the streets of criminals. Not unlike the Terminator, he's pretty much unstoppable. What sets him apart from Schwarzenegger, however, is that because he was formerly a human being, he retains portions of his memories, which interferes with his programming and gives him a vendetta against his killers. The effects work is fantastic, with one of my favorite moments revolving around the massive droid sentry, Ed 209. He's befriended by his former partner Lewis, who tries to help him regain his memory and acts as a sidekick throughout the duration of the film.
Murphy, it's you.
An urban legend was that when this film came out, an escaped criminal ran into a theater to hide from the cops. The film just happened to be RoboCop. The criminal was so mesmerized by what he was seeing on screen that he was oblivious to the authorities as they caught up to him. That story in itself is worthy of the name RoboCop. It's one of the more unique futuristic action movies out there. I wouldn't look twice at the terrible sequels, but this one's a keeper.